Welcome to the very first podcast episode on the I Heart My Fit Biz podcast. And this wasn't going to be the first episode I was going to start with, but I feel like it is the best one to start with because it's something that I've been doing in launching this podcast, which is procrastinating and waiting for the right time and waiting until I was ready to launch this. So I've wanted to do this for a while, a good 6 months at least, if not more than that. And I've just been putting it off. So I've had dates in mind when I'm going to launch my podcast then, I'm going to launch it then, I'm going to launch it then, and then months and weeks pass and I keep making up excuses as to why I'm not ready to launch, or it's not the right time, or I'm going to wait until this moment, or I need to be more ready, or I need to get this in place first. So lots of different excuses kept coming up, and I just wasn't launching this podcast. And maybe you are like that in your fitness business at the moment. Maybe you've got a big goal. Maybe it's something you want to go online. You want to get a new qualification. You want to launch something new in your fitness business. You want to get a website. You want to, whatever it is that you're procrastinating on, maybe you've got something in your fitness business and you are the one that is holding yourself back because you are stopping yourself. You are making those excuses. You are procrastinating, doing everything else but the thing you actually want to do. And you just keep telling yourself, I'll do that when I'm ready. I'll do that when this is done. I will do that when I've got more time, more money. Whatever those excuses are, they are just excuses. And so with this podcast, I literally started, I said to myself, right, I'm going to do 4 weeks of every single Monday, I'm going to record a new episode. So I have at least 4 episodes ready to launch. So, and then I kept my Monday time slot of recording a new episode, which meant I was always ahead, because that was one of my fears, that I was going to be launching this podcast and then not having time to create the episodes or not having enough content to share. And that was a huge thing. So I wanted to be ready. So I had that in place, and then I just kept putting it off. So I had 4 episodes in place ready to launch in January, and then I put it off because I didn't have time to figure the kind of technical stuff out, or I didn't have time to learn it, or I thought I had to do something really fancy to be able to do that. And then I thought to myself, well, I need to do a countdown and a marketing launch for this as well. So I need to get that in place first. I need to contact some people to be guests on my podcast. All of these things, every single week, there was a new excuse as to why I wasn't doing this. So again, I want you to think about your fitness business, and I want you to think about that big goal, or maybe it's not even big, maybe it's just something that you think is going to be really hard and really challenging. And most of the time when you actually do it, it's not. You just literally have to take one step and then another step and then another step and then another step. But the key here is just action and starting. So I want you to think about the one thing, and it probably comes to your mind immediately, whether it's a big thing, whether it's a small thing, whether it's just something that you have a mental block and you think is going to be really challenging, so you just don't start. And I want you to think about that thing, and I want you to use the tips in this first podcast to actually take those steps forwards and getting a start on those goals or on those things that you keep putting off. So I'm going to be sharing some tips on procrastination that I've used to launch this podcast finally. And hopefully it will help you, and you can come back to this podcast, or you can take these tips away with you and you can use them over and over again whenever you are feeling like you're putting things off, or you're procrastinating, or you're doing everything but the one thing that you want to do, or the one thing that you know you should be doing to move your fitness business forward, but there's just that mental block that you just keep making excuses not to do it. So just a little bit about what we're going to be covering in the podcast and in the podcast episodes. This is going to be all about your fitness business, how you can feel more motivated and inspired in your fitness business, how you can maybe turn your fitness business around and actually love your fitness business again. Maybe you're in a place where it's just becoming a little bit of a chore. You don't love it as much as you used to. Maybe all the business things are getting in the way of you actually really loving the services and the fitness classes that you're providing. And that's obviously the reason you got into a fitness business and why you set up a fitness business, so you could help people with what you love to do, which is either teaching fitness or nutrition or wellness or whatever speciality that you do in your fitness business. That is what you created a business for. So we're going to try and realign with why you created your fitness business. And I'm going to be sharing not only inspiration, motivation, but practical tips, like in this podcast episode where I'm going to be sharing tips on overcoming that procrastination. I will also be sharing tips and advice as we go through each episode and covering things that maybe you are a little bit stuck on. So if you have any suggestions that you want me to cover, anything that you're stuck on personally, please reach out to me. I'm always looking for inspiration and ways that I can help fitness business owners to thrive and move forwards in their business. But let's get started on that big one, procrastination. And it may be that you haven't even started a fitness business yet. Maybe you are a fitness professional who is contemplating starting a fitness business, maybe part-time or full-time, or giving up a full-time job to move fully into your fitness business. Whatever it is, maybe you are in that place where you are just procrastinating, stopping yourself, putting it off, making excuses, thinking you need something in place in order to be able to do what you want to do. So it's the biggest thing that I find holds me back in anything. If there's anything new that I'm starting, if I feel like it's going to be a big task, or just the sound of what I want to do sounds overwhelming, I will put it off and put it off and put it off. And no matter how motivated I am or how much I want it, sometimes that procrastination is just there, and over again, we create these blocks and these excuses and these justifications why we haven't done it yet. And all it is, and I do this with my to-do list as well. This is not just something I do like with big things in my fitness business or goals. This is something that I do with my everyday to-do list sometimes. Sometimes I look at my to-do list and I think, gosh, that seems like a really big task. That seems like a really big task. Oh, I don't think I've got quite time to do that. And actually, when I actually sit down and just focus on one task at a time and do it until it's done, it takes me way less time than I had in my head that it was going to take me to do. So maybe you're just using these tips for your to-do list. So it doesn't have to be using these tips for a big goal or something that you feel like you've been putting off. It could just be actually getting through your to-do list in your fitness business, or maybe just in life as well, to get those things done and crossed off your list. Procrastination is something that we all have, we all do, whether we recognize it or not. So you might be self-sabotaging certain things. It might even be habitual. Things that you do as a habit daily, you don't realize is actually holding you back or not moving you forward or stopping you from doing what you actually want to do. So I want you to think about one of those things. Again, whether it is just that feeling of when you look at your to-do list, that's just how you feel. You'd rather do anything else but the things on your list, or whether it is, that one thing that comes to mind that you think, I've been putting that off, I've been meaning to do that. And sometimes it is a thing that you've been putting off. Maybe you don't realize it, but for years and months and weeks. And you just think that time hasn't passed, but it actually has. So what is that number one thing that just springs to mind that you think, I've been putting that off and I need to just get started with it and get doing it? That is what I want you to write down. So if you've got a notepad nearby, or if you've got your phone, make a note of that one thing. And that is what you're going to use these tips to do, to kind of move forward with and to stop procrastinating on. And the first tip is just looking at where you're procrastinating. So what things are you doing instead of what you should be doing? So for me, with this podcast, it was all of the things that I thought I had to do to create this podcast. And when I thought about those things, it seemed like a really big thing. So I would just fill my time up with other things. So I created a new course. I created new content. I had other projects that I thought, no, I need to finish that first. I need to put my time into that first. And really, I didn't. I was just creating new things to put off creating this podcast. And so are there things in your day or on your to-do list, or maybe just things that you just turn to when you are putting off doing what you need to do? So if it's your to-do list that you're just putting off, what are you doing instead? Are you scrolling on Instagram? Are you watching Netflix? Are you creating things maybe in your house that you need to clean and you need to do, and you're making that a priority, and you're making that something that you need to do before you actually do what you want to do? So sometimes it's daily things that actually get in the way, and that we prioritize when we don't need to, just so we don't have to do what we want to do. So that big goal that we're going for. So I want you to become aware. So this is going to be something that you're just going to do daily. This is not a task that you can just, well, you can probably think about a few things, but you will probably notice these more in your day-to-day life. So when you make a priority of your goal or that thing that you're procrastinating, notice what comes up and notice what your go-to is instead. And that is just going to be a self-sabotaging habit, or it's going to be something that, again, you just naturally do something else. Again, for me, when it's a big goal, I tend to create content. So if I'm going for a big goal, or I want to launch something in one of my other areas of my fitness business always comes up, and I think I need to create new content for that. That comes first. I need to update that. That comes first. And I will just put off and off and off and off, thinking I need to do all this other stuff when actually I really don't. It's just my self-sabotaging way of not doing what I think I want to do, which was this podcast. So that's going to be a daily thing. It's going to be a weekly thing. And when we start putting the next few tasks in place, you will notice these things come up. You will notice where you are self-sabotaging. You will notice where you are procrastinating. You will notice where your focus goes instead of doing what is going to move you forward. So this number one is just being aware. Being in awareness of where your time, your energy is going instead of the time and energy that's going into what you want to put that time and energy into, what you're procrastinating on. So where are you diverting your attention, putting off what you want to be doing? So that's number one, and that's going to be something that you are going to just observe over the next few days, the next few weeks, as we start to implement the next few things. So the next thing that I did to stop this procrastination was to literally put the podcast tasks on the top of my to-do list. So they became non-negotiable. I cleared time in my schedule to actually make those podcast tasks a priority. So I want you to have a look at your to-do list. Maybe you don't use to-do lists. Maybe you just kind of do things every day, just kind of do what you need to do daily. But look at what you do daily and look at your to-do list. And then I want you to prioritize the tasks that are going to move you forward. So for me, it was a podcast. And that overall seemed really big. So what I did was, okay, what's the first thing that I need to do to be able to launch this? First of all, I knew I had those 4 episodes. So if I didn't have those 4 episodes ready to go, I would be like, right, that's going to make me feel more comfortable knowing that I've got the 4 episodes. So I'm going to schedule that as my first priority. Make sure those first 4 episodes are done, and make sure I've got time in my schedule to continue that practice of creating a podcast episode. So I'm never behind, and it's never something that, because that was one of my fears, that I was just going to launch the podcast and then rush every week to create a new episode. So I wanted to have that small backlog where I was always just slightly ahead. Then I knew that I needed somewhere to host and learn how to host a podcast. So that was my next task, was to literally, the one task on my list, research the best way to host a podcast and choose a platform to do that on. And so I did that. And then the next thing was to how to kind of edit the recordings and launch them on the podcast. And just really small action steps. And you don't have to have all those action steps ready. You just need to think of that first one, put it at the top of your to-do list, make it a priority. And not only put it at the top of your to-do list, because we all know how we can just look at a to-do list and then not do it, but actually schedule it into your timetable. So schedule it into your week or your day. Where is it going to go? When are you actually going to do that task? And then when it comes to doing that task, that's when you want to be aware of if you are diverting your attention to something different, if it comes around to it and you actually don't have time to do that task, why don't you have time if you've scheduled it? What is kind of pulling you away from that? And is it that actual task that's pulling you away from the priority? Because sometimes it's just, we think that we've got to do something better or something that's higher on our priority list. But actually, that thing is just a self-sabotaging way of us not actually getting on with the task. For me, the podcast. So, and I hope that makes sense. Sometimes I just talk and in my head it sounds okay, but sometimes out loud you might be thinking, what? So we've got those things in place now. So again, you're constantly going to be aware of what is bringing your attention, your time, your energy and focus away from what you're procrastinating about, and making sure that that time and energy is going to be redirected back to the task that you actually want to do that's going to move you forward. So then scheduling that task and those priority tasks that are going to move you forward in your schedule, on your to-do list, make sure that they become the priorities and actually schedule those times in. So even if it's once a week where you're clearing something, clearing an hour, and that just 1 hour, or even if it's just 10 minutes to start with, every single week, you know you've got that 10 minutes to do something that's going to take you towards your goal, which up until this point you've been procrastinating on and not doing. So the next and final thing that you are going to do to stop procrastinating is make sure that you have reminders or some sort of setup throughout your everyday life, that your work life, that is going to help you make those tasks a priority. So again, we all know that we can write a to-do list. We can move, again, for me, the podcast tasks to the top of my to-do list. I can clear a time in my week to do those tasks and make those tasks a priority. But again, sometimes we self-sabotage and different things come up and we are just literally, again, thrown off into that procrastination and we don't get around to doing it. So the one thing that I had in place was as soon as I turned my laptop on, as soon as I got the web browser up, I set it up in the settings of Google Chrome that as soon as I clicked on Google Chrome to come up, the Buzzsprout homepage would come up, which is where I'm hosting the podcast. So every time I turned on my laptop and got set up for the day to do all my admin stuff, that was the first thing that came up. So automatically, I'm going to do my podcast tasks first because I've set it up in a way that it makes it really easy for me to get started with those tasks first. So it might be something completely different for you. You might have literally just post-it notes around your house or around your office or in your car, reminding you to, I don't know, book that haul that you're putting off launching a new class. So you've got reminders on post-it notes just telling you, reminder, book that haul, phone that person, follow up with this person. So you've got things in place that are constant reminders that that's your priority and they're the tasks you need to be working on. It might be something like I had in place. Maybe you want to take your fitness business online. So the first thing that you're going to do is setting up your laptop or setting up your web browser so the page that you want automatically comes up. Maybe it's you need to invest in something. Maybe you need to invest in software or a course in order to move you forward. So again, maybe you set it up so that is always a reminder, comes up first on your web browser. Maybe you have a friend who you literally tell your friend, I need you to text me this every single day. So I'm on track with this task. So if you've got a really good friend or a business partner or a fellow fitness professional, Fit Biz owner that you know and you can keep each other accountable, then have something like that in place. And it's going to make a huge difference to your progress in what you're putting off and what you're procrastinating about. And it's going to help you to put those priority tasks that are going to move you forward, it's going to help you to put those at the top of your list and constantly remind you that that's what you should be doing or that's your priority and that needs to be done first. So there's lots of ways that you can set those reminders. And again, it might just literally be having post-it notes around. It might be reminders that like alarms that pop up on your phone. For me, I have alarms for pretty much everything while I'm building a habit. So I have an alarm for my workouts. If I know on certain days that I'm doing my workout, maybe at a different time, I'll set an alarm. So my alarm goes off and it reminds me that I've scheduled that next half an hour for my workout. So I know it's a priority. I know I get that reminder. I'm not kind of forgetting anything and I'm not spending my energy doing something else. So set those reminders. It's really easy to set a reminder on your phone that, if you start some admin stuff for your fitness business at a specific time on a specific day every week, then set an alarm for that time. So you know that when that alarm goes off, that's your reminder to actually do what you need to do. So those 3 things have really helped me and got me to this point. The first episode in my podcast or on my podcast. I don't know what you say, in or on, I don't know. But I hope you found that useful and you can start to implement these things on what you've been procrastinating on. Even if it's just something really small that you've been just putting off and not wanting to do, I promise you, you're going to feel so much better when you make that thing a priority. We sometimes stress ourselves out over the smallest things because we think it's going to be harder than it is. And actually, when we do it, it takes us a few minutes or a few hours out of our week. And actually, it's really straightforward once we know how to do it. So if that's one of the things that you're procrastinating because you're not sure how, just make that your first task. Research how you take that first step or research the end goal and then work back from there. And then you have a list of jobs, a list of tasks, a list of projects that you can start to implement bit by bit and step by step. If something feels huge and overwhelming, you're more likely to put it off and procrastinate. So break it right down and just focus on that one thing every day or every week that is going to move you forward. So I hope that's helped. Let me know if this has helped and if you are starting to implement those things. And also let me know what is taking your attention away from what you actually want to do. What is taking your time and energy? What do you naturally go to when you're putting something off? Because I find that so interesting when we are just putting things off. We want something really badly. We want to move forward, but we just naturally procrastinate and self-sabotage and just don't do what we need to do to get there. And it sometimes all stems from just that fear and that doubt and that disbelief inside ourselves that we can actually do it. And that's why we procrastinate. We try and find something else to do other than what we know is going to move us forward, make us happier, and help our fitness businesses to thrive as well. So let me know if you found any of this useful. I will be back next week I'll have a podcast episode every single week. If there's anything you want me to cover surrounding your fitness business or how you feel about your fitness business or anything like that, then please reach out to me and I'm happy to cover and help you out in the best way I can. Make sure you click the link below to download the free resource of overcoming procrastination.